Around what year did Marvel really start becoming a threat? Because I've seen some of the sales charts,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't think like Marvel was making like the top 20, the top 50 until around 66.
that's very possible. But you know who was doing Marvel's distribution?
DC.
hmm And DC knew what the distribution was because and they also could see that the sales were going up, but they also knew that this was something different.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Comics Cube. Today I am with Miss Barbara Friedlander. Hello there. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
I hope everything is going well amidst the COVID pandemic.
Changed a few lives, I must say.
Changed a few routines.
Yes, I now wear masks and gloves a lot. So it really has. I live in Connecticut, and Connecticut is a gentle kind of a place. So we've been very lucky. People sort of follow the rules here.
I used to spend some time in Connecticut when I lived there. So very nice people. You worked at DC Comics in the Silver Age. And my first question is just going to be, how did you get into DC Comics?
Well, I got into DC Comics because I had graduated high school and my dad had passed away my senior year. So I was and I was living with my mom at the time. And I just didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. My friends were going to college, or they were getting married, or they were going to secretarial school, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I enrolled at Hunter College at night, and that was fine. And then I realized I should really do something. So a friend of mine sent me to a couple of interviews because he owned, I don't know if they still have them, agencies, where you go for a job or something. So I went to that. And my second interview was DC Comics in the department where they did the subscriptions and bookkeeping and things like that. It was not attached. It was attached, but a long walk away from where the editorial department was. And that's where I started taking subscriptions for Batman, Superman.
That's interesting because you did mention, in a blog post that you did, that among the subscriptions, you were getting a lot of subscriptions from prisons and youth centers.
I was. I mean, people have to read no matter where they are. And Superman, I guess, was a hero to everybody. And there were a lot of anti-heroes there too. So, yes.
That's very interesting. Like these people locked in would find hope in these characters.
Maybe they were finding ways to get out of prison, flying. I don't know. But yeah, there was a lot of prisoner mail.
What was the work atmosphere like at DC at the time?
Two different work atmospheres, okay? Now, where I was working, it was women secretaries and women bookkeepers and women subscription takers. And one man was the head of the office. He was a lovely man. His name was Arthur Gutowitz. And he was very nice to me because he said, "Barbara, you sure you want to be here?" He was very nice, and he agreed with my mother that I should not be here. I should be working on getting a husband or something like that. But I needed, to grow up. I needed a place to come to 9 to 5, and the atmosphere was very much, I'm sure, of any office atmosphere. you have one side that's very technical and the other side that's sort of crazy because they're the editorial staff and the bullpen, which were the permanent inkers and permanent letterers and colorists that were in part of the permanent staff.
So you're mentioning secretarial school and women secretaries and all that. Safe to say it was a much different time.
This was a time just hitting on women's liberation loudly because of media. There was more media involved in it than there was when the real workers that were being brutalized and forced to eat food at turn of the century and a little bit later on that had to deal with presidents and men who thought that women were, you know, inferior. And believe me, women had their jobs to do, and the men at that time felt they were up on a bookcase someplace.
That is, you think, so things have much improved since then, but I guess we still have a long way to go, right? Like,
Well, the people that I'm dealing with now are really, because after so many years, I finally got back into the comic book field, and I'm now writing love stories, and I'm doing a little bit of humor, but humor is not my favorite thing. I love writing love stories, and I love editorials if I can do them. So people are nicer now, and they recognize that they have to accept women because we're the other half, and they don't do very well without us.
How did you get into writing from the subscription office?
Okay, I went to Hunter at night, so I was taking all the English courses and all the stuff, and I took a writing course just because I wanted to express myself. And I would write things and submit them. And one day when I was working, doing subscriptions, and I did other things because Mr. Gutowitz kept saying, you should really learn how to type. You should really learn how to. I didn't learn these things. I had to learn myself, and it wasn't a lot of fun. I couldn't really take dictation, but he insisted I should take dictation. So I had to scribble everything. My typing was really amusing at the time. But how I expressed myself was Mr. Donenfeld, who was Harry Donenfeld's son to the business that I alluded to before. He was the son of the original printer who had these two great guys walk in and hand him Superman and stuff like that. He was this brings in the atmosphere of the other side, the writers and the artists and the editors. They were being hit by Marvel, and Marvel was coming up with heroes that were not one-dimensional heroes. I mean, if they had the heroes had to scratch themselves, they scratched themselves, and they had emotional problems. And Batman and Superman didn't necessarily have these traumas in their life. They had bad guys that went after them, but there wasn't that middle ground where there was an edge to everyone. And so Irwin decided he's sending out a mailing. And to make a long story short, instead of getting people involved in hiring extra people to stuff envelopes with his mailing of, what do you want Superman to do? Do you want Superman? What do you want Batman to do? It was a long kind of a thing. He asked several of the editors to come in and do it. Like the editors had nothing better to do. And basically I met the editors that way. And they looked at me like another nice little girl working in the department. But Jack Miller was very nice to me. And one got up the courage, handed him one of my stories, and he said, you know, he made a few comments and corrections, and I handed it in, and the professor liked it. So I realized it would be a good thing to really learn how to do what I'm doing. And eventually he taught me how to put together a love story, because I never read those things. I loved Archie, and I loved Katie Keene and Brenda Starr, and I was not into, you know, stuff that, and I have never written a superhero, never asked to either, for obvious reasons. So that's how I got to know the editorial staff. And I had this, I made up this tagline that said, "No one stands so tall as when he stoops to stuff." And it was stuffing all these things. And that's it. That's how I got involved. And Mr. Donnenfeld seemed to like me, and he was doing a lot of the hiring. And so he hired me to do freelance, and I was doing freelance writing for Mr. Miller, who had 5 or 6 books at the time of romance. And then Mr. Donnenfeld decided I should be an associate editor or an assistant editor. And that's basically it. I mean, it didn't happen quite that fast, but it was in the early 1960s. My dad passed away in 62, which led me to this journey into finding a job, going to school, and that was it. I mean, that launched my career. However, I didn't realize this was a career. I still was focused on what every mother wants their daughter to do then, get married. So that's where I was. Now you're gonna have to go on from there and tell me what you want to know.
Do you have a specific story that you are very proud of?
Well, I am very, very proud of the soap operas that I wrote, which were continuing dramas about girls, women, I'll say women, going through different adventures and not necessarily ending up happily married or making the right choices. I'm very happy. One was called Reach for Happiness, and the other one was 3 girls, their lives, their loves. Now, people say, did you know that we're 3 girls or apartment 3 something in the newspaper? I said, no, I had no idea, because I really wasn't involved with that. So, but I did enjoy writing those and certain other stories as well.
Sorry. I thought you can keep going.
Well, I one particular story that I did like very much. I think it was a 6-pager. I'm not sure. It was about a girl who keeps falling in love and out of love, and the reason she does it is because she has to really find the right man, and when the right man kisses her, she knows she's in love. I mean, that's very basic stuff, but it was kind of thing that wasn't done because she kept falling in love and falling out of love in 6 pages.
Do you have a specific artist that you liked working with?
I love 2 artists, Tony Abruzzo, and I loved Scott Pike. Those are my 2 go-to people. I really love them, but there were other artists that were wonderful as well. But for my stories, it's like when you picked up a Cosmopolitan magazine, you always knew it was Cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
And those 2 people had the right edge that I was looking for my 3 girls and my Reach for Happiness.
You also wrote a comic called Swing with Scooter, which is about a British musician who leaves his band and comes to the U.S.
Yes, I did that. I remember all the characters. I had to sit there, and this was completely out of my wheelhouse. I mean, even though I read Archie, I didn't want it to be Archie, but I guess as time went by and I left, it sort of ended as Archie because the artist was changed and it had that comic-y kind of look to it that I hate. Joe Orlando was the original guy that I worked with, and he was terrific. I loved him. But when you sit down and you're doing something, and I'm looking all around me and saying and thinking to myself, someone here is going to find out that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I had to do it, so you do it. I mean, it's not like I was lifting a truck off someone. It wasn't an impossible thing. And so I just did it. And that's the way I learned it. By the seat of my pants, I learned. And I never felt comfortable doing that again, but I did do other comic stuff. And some of it, the more sarcastic stuff that I wrote, I really liked. I worked for, let's see, Ross, Andru, and Esposito. Do you know those two?
Ross Andru is one of my favorite artists of all time.
Okay. I worked for those two after I left DC. They called me up and they said, we're putting out a book called Selma of the Apes. Have you ever heard of Selma of the Apes?
I have.
I wrote the first few stories about Selma and the origin stories about how they got to be up your nose and out your ear. And then, of course, you either have wonderful distribution and you're ahead, or you don't have good distribution, which these two wonderful people did not have. So that did not do anything, but I did do that. But I felt more comfortable because I had the scooter under my belt, and this could be more sarcastic. I don't know, what do you think? Did you ever read Selma of the Apes?
I've never seen a copy.
Very tongue-in-cheek.
I've never seen a copy. I've only seen a few scans.
You should have emailed me, and I would have pulled out my copies of it. You can still pick it up, though. It's a rarity, but you can still pick it up.
Great. I can add that to my Ross Andru list too, because I told you he's like one of my favorites. So.
Yeah, he was. The thing was, Selma was a girl who grew up with gorillas. Now, I didn't get the origin of the story. They told me what the origin was, and then they said, just write how she comes to the U.S. And she has no clothes on the whole thing, even though they try to dress her. She never has any clothes on. And that was the story. And she was a fun character to create and write. And I was overwhelmed and flattered that they asked me to do that.
Can I ask you a few questions about the work about some anecdotes at DC? Well, the anecdotes were the books came out either monthly or bi-monthly. So during those periods of time, people were running in first with a storyline, and then a few weeks later, you'd see the artwork coming in. And of course, everybody was a little nervous because they had to get the artwork in, they had to make the point in the story, and the bullpen was going crazy because they had to brush up everything. And that's when Mort got particularly nuts with poor Nelson, who was there he had a razor, and he would erase the tiniest lines that nobody would see. But everybody was on point. It had to be, because you were sending in a story and that was going to be in a complete book. And in back of everybody's mind was what Irwin and the rest of the executives were thinking. I have to get this right because we have great competition now. We have wonderful competition at Marvel. And a lot of them people who had worked for DC and now went over to Marvel were like,
they could be shot on sight by the executives that you're not loyal to this, you're not loyal to that. But that's how it was. And when the Warner executives, and now this is a little bit after the Warner executives came in, suddenly the office was really, because nobody knew what they were going to do, how they were going to reorganize, who was going to still be there, who was not, who would be fired. And that was the atmosphere. It was tense. It really was.
Around what year did Marvel really start becoming a threat? Because I've seen some of the sales charts.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think like Marvel was making like the top 20, the top 50 until around 66.
That's very possible. But you know who was doing Marvel's distribution?
DC.
Mm-hmm. And DC knew what the distribution was because they were, and they also could see that the sales were going up, but they also knew that this was something different.
Mm-hmm.
There was a different atmosphere. And some of the best people went over there because Stan Lee welcomed people. It was a different atmosphere. I never met Stan Lee, but I know people who adored him. And some of the artists just said it's less, you can have more freedom.
You did meet a few legendary comics creators as well. Bob Kane, Bill Finger.
Yes, I met Bob Kane, and Bob Kane was he reminded me a little bit of the Joker because his mouth was like the Joker. And he unlike Schuster and the other guy,
Siegel. Yeah.
He had made a deal. So he was okay with a character. And I don't know what Bob Finger was doing. He just didn't have the I'll use the word chutzpah and background. And he sort of was fading. He was being abused by Mort a lot. So that's all I can say about that.
It sounds like Mort Weisinger was as scary as the legends make him sound. There is an urban legend about Mort Weisinger, and I just want to ask if you would know if it's true. I've heard that at his funeral, somebody said, well, at least his brother was worse. Is that true?
I don't know. I don't know, but I think that people, all the creative people and the regular, everybody is creative. Let's just put it that way. And everybody can have a good sense of humor and be very clever. And this group of people all were that way in spades. I mean, if that was true, and I'm sure it was, because out of respect they went, but they didn't go to say, oh, I'm so sad. They went to say, goodbye, you nice man, kind of thing. And I didn't go to that funeral, so I really can't tell you.
But
I will tell you.
Okay, go on. Yeah, please tell me.
I will tell you something that has nothing to do with the writing or anything. I don't know if you heard the story about what I told you about the printers. I don't know if you ever heard that story before. And parts of what I told you, I'm sure, are true. There was a man that also worked for the printer, and I can't remember his name. I just remember he was a round guy that had all his suits made, and he and the chauffeur, whose name was George, used to pal around together. And this man, I don't know why I can't remember his name, but he had worked for Donenfeld and Leibowitz for so many years in the sweatshop and in the printer that they gave him a position of being the social director, or he would take people out. I think they just did it as loyalty for being hanging on for so many years. And he was a delightful man. And well, I don't have time to tell you about him or George the chauffeur. You see, I was on both ends of the stick, so I know these people. But George was this magnificent man who wore alligator shoes. I mean, that was the chauffeur. I mean, that was the atmosphere. It was, you know, I don't know how to say it. It was professional, but it also had this sympathetic heart that, you know, it was crazy.
That sounds fun. That looks like sounds like a fun place to work.
God, they were fun. I mean, they were fun. He was this guy that I can't remember his name. If you went and got water, he said, "Why do you drink water? Do you know what fish do in water?" You know, that. And he was just very charming. He would send out. This is a man who had money. He'd send out Christmas cards to all of these people and not put any stamps on it, and make the return address the address that the card was going to. So you wonder why the post office is losing money. But that was way back then. I mean, he was a character. He was a real character.
Why do you think romance comics fell out of favor?
Because romance fell out of favor and sex came in. And women were expressing themselves now as in 72 or 73, romance died. And that's because sex came in and there was no middle ground. You either a Girl Scout or you were the other kind. And wars were being waged. Vietnam War was there and it was ugly. And you couldn't deny that the world was turned upside down and was ugly. And that's, I think, what killed romance, because romance, I was restricted. Everybody who wrote romance was restricted by the code, the comic books code. Yeah. So you could not show two people doing anything but passionately kissing. And you had to draw conclusions that they were either having sex or they were picking each other's pockets, let's just say. And the storylines were ridiculously funny. Now, when Carmine Infantino became the editor or the overseer for all the artwork, and Joe Orlando was editor for a while of the romance, he tried to put in these other people that, and I couldn't write that stuff. I didn't like that stuff. I mean, I don't know if I was any judge or jury of this, but I felt that because love had really died and sex was now in, there would be no romance books. No one wanted to spend 15 or 25 cents for something that really wasn't real. And that's why they died. Now I am working with Ken Wheaton, and I hope this comes to fruition because he's working on I call it a novelette, and I wrote the stories in it of romance. And this is lovely, sweet, beautiful romance. And just like Cosmopolitan had beautiful women on the cover every month, I don't know if they still do because I don't see Cosmopolitan that much. That would appeal to, it has a storyline in it. And I hope they, get it off the ground. I really do. I think it's something that now people are hungry for. We'll see.
So you call it a novelette, but will it basically be comics?
I don't know what they're going to call it. I do because I wrote the stories to be more sophisticated. And they said, write one in this particular time period write one in this time period. And the last one I wrote was in the Roaring 20 time period. So we'll see what happens.
That sounds interesting. What's it going to be called?
I have no idea. I said, I'm suggesting a romance novelette. I don't know what they're going to call it. And I wish 1,000 times over that they have good success with it, because it's coming at a time when people are blowing themselves up and shooting them. I think this is a softness that people need, a kind of hopefulness that people need, that things can be beautiful.
That
I don't know.
sounds really inspiring, because like a lot of people these days will say that the world needs to be tougher. And
Does need to be tougher in people's knowledge of other things, but it doesn't need to be tougher with your fists. And unfortunately, there's no happy medium.
mhm.
So anyway, we'll see what happens with that. And I also worked on recently, actually year ago, I worked on a book for another group that's called Jetta Ray, which is a resurrection of an old comic.
Yeah, by Dan DeCarlo. Yeah.
I'll see what happens with that. It's funny, when I wrote that, they had already put together the first book. I don't know what's happening with that, but I'm giving it a plug because I want to see it really do well. And I wrote the second book. Now, I wrote it, and the guy said to me, I like the story, but your dialogue is old. And it was. I realized that because I was writing Scooter stuff. So if it does come out, it'll be in the second book. I don't know who the artists are. I had asked to see some of the artwork, and they showed me some of the artwork. I was doing a show at Mohegan Sun 2 years ago, and they came by and showed me the character and told me it was from the, I think, 50s, and they were resurrecting it. And I don't remember that much, except I said, okay, let me try it, because I really wanted, to all you out there, I want to get back into comics. So I'm hoping that it does get off the ground, especially for these guys, it would be nice.
I've been looking forward to that since it was announced, because I love Jetta Ray. So
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know who's.
it's great.
I can look it up in my file on my computer and send you an email. And you can look into.
I just have one last question. Why did you leave, and why do you want to come back to comics? I guess that's two questions.
Okay, it's all right. I say things like that. I left to get married, and I had no idea I could really do both. But for me, it was very important that I have children and that I get married. And that was a thorn in my side. And because everybody said you don't belong here, so that right away I was, dumped. I felt like I was dumped. But that's why I left. And why I got back into comics was because I Googled my name. Because Friedlander was a name that I used, don't tell me how long ago, but a long time ago. And I was there. I mean, I was actually on a Google thing. So it sort of inspired me, and I did a Mohegan Sun. And I enjoyed doing it. I mean, I did a panel with Cooperberg. He's a lovely guy who does do romance, but he does very edgy romance. Have you ever seen any of his Paul Cooperberg's books?
Yeah, I've seen Paul Cooperberg's books, but not the romance books.
He signed something for me, and he was delightful. I was on a panel with him, and I had no idea people even knew who I was. But I'm like the 149th character. at DC. But yeah, so I enjoyed that a lot. I really did. And I did a couple of other shows as well. And I was looking forward to a show, but all of them have been canceled.
Have you taken a look at the landscape of comics today and the number of female creators in it? It's
that I see when what am I working on? I did a sort of an anthology of how I got started for Jack somebody, I can't remember his name right now. He's putting together like a book of all creators of different things, and everybody can tell a story. So and it was 8 pages. So I chose an artist to work on my book named Tintin. You know her?
Tintin Pantoja? She's from the Philippines. Yeah.
You can get in touch with her. I told her that, and I named all the people that I really liked and worked with, and some crazies as well. And I said, all you have to do is, like for Nelson, all you have to do is have his crew cut and his black glasses, and you've got him. He always wore the same suit and stuff. And so she's working on that. And God, why can't I remember? Well, anyway, that's coming out. It's going to be like an anthology. So a lot of people are involved with that.
That's great.
So I really can't wait to do some more work. It's enjoyable to me at this time of my life. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, and you've got the knowledge to bring to the table. That's amazing.
I finally learned. I'm one of these stubborn people who don't want to know, so I have to go backwards into the fire or something instead of really opening my eyes and seeing it. A lot of people are like that. And you just have to do it. I've learned that in this life, you do it, or somebody else will do it for you.
Well, my last question was actually going to be, what advice would you give to people who wanted to get into comics? But I guess you just answered it.
Do it. If you love something, no matter what it is, and except being a hatchet murderer, something crazy like that, then seek medical help. But, and I had to say that a lot because I wrote romance advice to the Lord. Seek medical help. See your priest, see your whatever. But just do it. Do it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Friedlander.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
I look forward to seeing this. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.